So I'm wanting to talk about the UK energy crisis. And actually, we were just talking off air before we came on, and it turns out you're actually a proper energy expert.
I wouldn't use the term expert. I had a couple of years background in energy policy. I did write a policy paper, which I sent to the UK government, and they did incorporate some of the findings into the nuclear financing bill of 2022.
This is excellent.
And since then, I have absolutely no hope that we're going to go in a positive direction because they're already ideologically captured, but we'll see.
Funnily enough, that was going to come up in the section. But yeah,
Sure.
Good. So you can really add to this. Now, look, where I wanted to start with this is there's a website that I like to go to every now and again. It's National Grid Live. Let's see if we can throw that up on the page. Actually, no, before I do, let me just talk about our promoting one of our premium slots, which is the Contemplations number 64, Venezuela's Economic Collapse Explained. The reason I wanted to bring this one up is because it's not just South American countries that can experience economic collapse. They can happen closer to home as well. For example, if you don't get your energy policy right.
Well, this is a prime example because Venezuela was actually a petrostate, and then they decided to annoy all of their neighbours and particularly irritate the American petrodollar. But if they absorb themselves into BRICS quite cleverly in the future, they may be able to rebound their economy, and it's just because we're imploding our energy security, much to the enrichment of our enemies.
Yeah, because they're actually an incredibly oil-rich nation, aren't they? And interestingly, they produce quite a heavy form of crude, so that when they sanctioned the Russians, you had all these refineries that set up they couldn't process the light crude coming out of Saudi Arabia, so they had to unsanction Venezuela in order to sort of bring them back into the system. But yeah, so that is relevant to what we're talking about. Right, now, this website that I'm talking about, I like to check on it from time to time, especially at the moment, because it gives you a sort of overview where we are. And this is the National Grid Live. Now, actually, at the moment, it's not that bad, the level of pricing that you're seeing on there at the moment. I'm viewing this as sort of around midday, and of course that's the time when it's both the windiest and the sunniest, so the renewable element of it is coming through. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because before lockdowns, we were typically paying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, since you know about this one, but something in the region of about £65 per megawatt hour is about what we were paying before lockdowns. Since then, we are regularly experiencing at the moment the sort of £400 to £500. This is a sort of massive increase in the amount of cost that we're paying. And actually, we've just had a period of a couple of weeks where it's been exceptionally cold and it's not been windy, and we've had spikes of up to £2,000 per megawatt hour. So it is more than a tenfold increase. It's more like a 30-fold increase in what we were sort of paying before the lockdown period.
Bear in mind as well, the reason the renewables prices look lower than they are is because we've been subsidising them to the tune of billions for the past few years. Also, this unexpected bout of cold weather, which the Met Office were unable to predict because they were sat at home on their laptops, still working from home despite the UK not being locked down for over a year. This has a knock-on effect to whether or not they can generate as much as well, because one of the main things that happens with wind turbines is if the actual turbine gets too cold, then it just freezes up and you need to get in a helicopter with either a flamethrower or a jet wash to de-ice it. And also,
Seriously?
Yeah. There's actual photos and videos of stuff out there. It's hilarious. I actually went to Whitley Wind Farm, which is the largest inland
I've got to say that is
farm.
quite a cool job. What's your job? My job is to use a flamethrower out of a helicopter.
Not all that carbon neutral, though. Neither is the carbon fibre which they're coated in. But the experts at Whitley Wind Farm actually said to me, yeah, they don't really make back the energy it costs to make them in their lifetime. They're made in China and Spain and imported over by shipping crate. And you definitely need nuclear and gas as a dispatchable base load for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Or if the wind blows too much, like last year when we spent £500,000 upwards of that, there's a Telegraph article on that, so you can correct me on the number, but I think that's the number, turning them off because they couldn't feather them, because if they spun too fast in the high winds, they would just break. And one turbine did actually flop over.
Well, that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I thought actually you were going to say that this unexpected period of cold weather, I thought you were going to say it's called winter.
Yes.
But however it came about, it caught the Met Office completely off guard for whatever reason. Right, yeah, but so look, energy is important because it is the base tier of your economy. The only reason why Connor and I are able to do this pontificate on the internet and you're able to do whatever it is that you do is because we have abundant free energy, cheap energy. If it wasn't for that, we would all be subsistence farmers, working the land. It is the absolute base tier of everything we do. So it really matters. So, this website is interesting because it gives you the sort of stats, it gives you the numbers. You can see that the prices that we're experiencing at the moment are significantly higher than they have been. So let's just do a quick recap and figure out if we can look at the problem. So Well, first of all, how much energy do we need? Well, typically in the summer, it's around about 30 gigawatts, and in the winter, it's somewhere between sort of 38 and 40 gigawatts. So we need quite a lot of energy. And where does our energy come from? Well, actually, it turns out that in this country, we're not doing too badly on wind because we're an island in the Atlantic. So we get about 30% of our energy from wind when those blades aren't collapsing or being flamethrowered. We get about 40% from gas, about 15% from nuclear, which is nowhere near as good as it could be. And then we got 15% from basically everything else, solar, coal, biomass, the rest of it. So this works sometimes. I check it today. It looks like it's basically working more or less today. Unfortunately, it's not always windy. It's not always sunny. And actually, it's quite common at the moment to see us drawing something like, 15%. Let's have a look at what it is now. So we are currently drawing, we're drawing 11% of what we need from overseas. A lot of that from France, which is making us dependent on obviously other European countries.
Do you know the Green Party's plan for an energy-independent UK? This is on their website, so you can check me on this, right? They want to abandon all fossil fuels except for gas in the transition period. So they're being reasonable. Their sole MP, the Green Party MP, Caroline Lucas, said we don't need nuclear power plants, so that's off the table. And their solution for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine is we're going to have an interconnected network of undersea cables between countries to share power and all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Absolutely no national security problems there, even with the French when, for example, they cut off power to the Jersey Islands because they don't like our Brexit or immigration policies. I'm sure we'll be friends with everybody.
So I think that the security angle is particularly important because, like I say, at the moment we are typically drawing around 5 gigawatts from France.
Yeah.
You got to think they got us by the short and curlies there, and maybe that's why we're not pushing back on the small boats issue.
Well, especially because France as well are a net energy exporter because they've got so many nuclear power stations. It's raking it in for the French treasury at the moment. I think they generated something like 15 billion excess in 2020 in excess revenue.
And that could be us if we sorted our energy position out. So look, so we know that we got a problem. We know that we're paying far more than we used to. We know that we're dependent on potentially malevolent foreign powers like France in order to get our energy. So what are the solutions? And I've come up with 4 solutions. See if our resident energy expert agrees with me. But the first one that I've thought of is, what about some nuclear?
Yeah.
Now, I want to go to an article, first of all, here. This is, we do actually have a nuclear plant which is nearing completion. And this is what people were saying about it back in 2015. They were saying, and there's the one section that I want to quote from here. There is also the small matter of the jaw-dropping price the Treasury has agreed to pay. £92 per megawatt hour, which is double the current market rate. This will rise with inflation for 35 years. Now, £90 per megawatt hour. You bite your arm off to get that these days.
Yes, it is dwarfed by inflation rates. Also, the paper that I wrote actually meant that the UK government wouldn't have to guarantee the construction at all. Because the problem with nuclear plants, and I've consulted with a nuclear engineer doing this, is that over the life cycle, specifications change, the tech changes, you might move towards small modular reactors instead because they're more economical and it wasn't available when you commissioned it. And you've got to constantly keep pace with meeting new safety regulations. So the budget will always go up. The issue is you've got a set of investors at the start that guarantee it for a certain amount, and the government often guarantees a proportion of it. So they invest for a percentage, so that goes up over time, and that ends up costing the taxpayer, who are also at the same time paying for the energy. And then they go overseas and guarantee different loans. This is why Hinkley and Sizewell have got stakes in it from Chinese General Nuclear, and they have a 22 and a 33% stake in, I can't remember which way.
So I thought Hinkley was mainly French, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the Chinese do also have a stake in it.
Right, okay.
Yeah, which is because they went over budget, and so they went, right, we need Chinese money for it. Because the government was guaranteeing the loan. Instead, if you did a feed-in tariff system, which allowed the companies investing in it to price into the energy bills, and this is provided you're getting energy from safe sources like coal and gas rather than just rubbish renewables at the time, so energy bills wouldn't be sky high if we were sensible. But if you allowed them to price it into the energy bills over time, that would mean you had a 10 to 20% increase on your energy bills for the 10-year period it takes to construct it, and then suddenly your energy bills would halve overnight because you've got the nuclear power plant constructed, and that becomes the primary source.
So I've got some stats here on the viability of nuclear and the cost of it. You talked there about small nuclear reactors. Are they even more cost effective? Are they an even better
Yes.
option? Okay,
Yes.
right. So basically, if my numbers work for nuclear, they're going to work even better with the small nuclear reactors.
Yes, and they're way easier to implement, way easier to deploy, and you can have more of them in more areas, so you have an even more abundance.
Because what I was going to point out is, I'm going to say, look, if we built 9 more of these Hinkley Point Cs, that would cost us about the same as running the NHS for a year. And that would provide us that would take us to the point where we were completely energy independent, and actually on windy days we would be exporting power to energy. We would be the ones raking it in because we would provide, and the wind power typically comes through around midday, which is when the factories with the peak demand time is. So yeah, that would work for us. And actually, even if we built only 5 more nuclear power stations, that would cost us the same as what we spend on education in a year, about 100 billion. And again, that would give us that energy security. Most of the time, we'd be generating everything we need, and there'd only be the odd occasion where it wasn't particularly windy and particularly cold, where we'd be having to buy anything from overseas abroad. So yeah, this is a solution, but the politicians, they just don't want to know it. They are not interested in this option, despite it being obviously the solution.
There's a clip that a friend of mine tweeted out from quite a while ago of Nick Clegg just after being elected to the coalition government, and he said that the energy plan to build nuclear power plants is utterly untenable because they wouldn't come online until 2020. Watching that in 2022 is rather infuriating.
Yeah, quite. Right, solution number 2 that I came up with is do some fracking. So fracking has absolutely transformed the situation in the US. I've got this article here which throws in some numbers. It's quite remarkable. Using fracking techniques has helped the US tap into vast oil and gas reserves that are inaccessible to traditional drillers. During the fracking boom of the 2010s, the US overtook Russia and Saudi Arabia as the biggest crude and oil and gas producers worldwide. Its oil production rose from 5.4 million barrels per day to 13 million barrels a day in 2019. So absolutely remarkable transformation in energy security in the US.
Until the Biden administration, that is.
Until the Biden administration. And we could do that here. Now, not this article, another article, which we don't need to pull up, which basically based on the British Geographical Survey, estimated that we had 1,300 trillion cubic feet of gas, which would basically meet our demand for 40 years.
Yeah, we'd be energy independent if we tapped 10% of all of the North Sea reserves and or fracking for half a decade. It's pretty inarguable, and I have seen with Richard Tice's Reform Party, for example, I was going to have an opportunity to discuss with him on air, but there was a booking error, unfortunately, so it got cancelled. But when he was doing the by-election in my constituency in Bexley, he was campaigning off of the idea that Reform would have a British energy company, which the Labour Party also seems to be proposing, but the Labour Party would make it 100% renewable. He would have shale gas. Now, by instinct, I think both of us are very much, we don't want government to own any industry just because they have a tendency to bugger things up. However, if you created a very protectionist, particularly at a wartime, if they keep genuflecting to it being Putin's price hike for the reason we're paying all these energy prices, if you had an insulated, repatriated gas production market, which provided us with abundant resources and then we could export to the outside world, this may be a reason to be slightly more state protectionist, particularly with this resource, and I think that seems to be quite sensible.
Well, perhaps if it's a national security angle, we can bend on principle to a certain extent. And you say it's unarguable, but the Tory MPs don't seem to agree that it is not arguable. So there was a major Commons revolt on this back in October. So those of you who are really good at British political trivia might remember somebody called Liz Truss, who was Prime Minister for a couple of weeks. Now, during her tenure, she decided that she wanted to overturn the ban on fracking, and I maintain that Liz Truss had good instincts. It was just unfortunate that she was a bit of an idiot and couldn't sort of command her party or the media or her own government or her ministers. But she did have the right instincts when it came to fracking. So she tried to overturn this, and there was a major Commons revolt. This is an article back from October in the Standard, where they're talking about Liz Truss was facing a revolt by Tory MPs opposed to fracking on Wednesday, despite Whip saying that it was a crunch Commons vote and a confidence motion. And they ended up making it a free line whip, and they ended up with a massive revolt anyway. They did get it through, but then it was almost immediately overturned following the next coup where Rishi Sunak came in. So, you got a situation where you got Tory MPs who are busy putting Ukraine flags in their profile. Until very recently, the main Conservative Party website replaced the Union Jack with the Ukraine flag. So they're all about sanctioning Russia and telling us that that Putin is this demon prince.
Yep.
At the same time, cutting off the alternative.
I do think, and I believe this was articulated, I don't know if you were in the stream at the time, but by our mutual favourite 80s puppet Rat, that there is a schism within the Tory party concerning the neocons on one side and the Globalist International on the other side. And the Globalist International are very much represented by Rishi Sunak, in particular Jeremy Hunt, with their affinity for the UN, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and the Chinese model of governance, making us into a social democracy with a social credit system eventually. But Liz Truss is very much on the war hawk side of things. And so reframing energy security as a national security issue has definitely won folks like her over. And so I think she wanted to take on fracking, not because she wanted to abandon net zero, because that's what a lot of the globalist press were talking about when they were saying, oh, she is pandering to the Brexit-loving
we're using a lot
populist
of gas
base.
anyway. It's just getting it
Where we get it
getting
from.
it here.
Exactly, rather than Theresa May selling off all our shale gas reserves. I think she was persuaded to tap into gas, not because she didn't want net zero to go ahead, but because she saw it as a war asset. And what she didn't realise is she wasn't on board with the global plan of, we want renewables because they're rationable and it's easy to immiserate the poor, and then if you say the wrong thing on social media, we can turn it off overnight.
Right, okay. Solution number 3, apologise to Russia. So this is where we basically say, look, we acknowledge that the Ukraine conflict is really a Ukrainian civil war between Kiev and Donbass, and it's being interfered massively by the great powers, the US on one side and Russia on the other side. We could recognise that had the Minsk agreement actually been upheld, we wouldn't be in this situation. Perhaps there would have been some new settlement with the Donbass. Perhaps it could be functionally autonomous, but still within it. But we're past that now. We've gone all in behind the US war effort when we didn't really have a dog in this fight. So it is questionable as to whether Putin would even want to sell to us at this point, having pivoted effectively to the east. What's your take on this?
Well, I was going to say that we're in a annoying conundrum where Rishi Sunak today, it's been reported by the Times, who are very pro-Ukraine war as well, because William Hague just published an op-ed in there saying that they need sea-to-air missiles supplied by us. But Rishi Sunak is being criticised because he's running, quote, Goldman Sachs dashboards on the cost effectiveness of the war. So he's looking at how much we're sending over in aid. The problem we have is even if he rescinds the amount of aid we're supplying as a percentage of our GDP, and he isn't as war hawkish, he's still going to push the pedal on net zero anyway, because that's part of the international plan, as Stanley Johnson once said.
So I think we've only... I know the US has given a lot. I think we've only given about $4.5 billion at this point. So the amount that we've given isn't actually that high. It's the knock-on effects. It's the energy effects that are really hurting us.
But proportionate to how much of our budget, and also we are still the second most around the world that has provided financial aid. Yes, the US are the largest, but then also their economy is exponentially larger than ours. So,
well, they print a lot more money than we do, and we print a lot. Right, so that was option number 3. Solution number 4, give up on net zero. That one's going to be tricky because that would be like trying to get the Pope to give up his allegiance to Beelzebub, or the global elites give away their penchant for islands full of underage children.
As a Catholic, I felt that one in my soul.
But
but I agree.
And also, of course, net zero is the mechanism by which they are seeking to control us. They are going to use net zero to get us into the pod and eating the bug. So I don't think that this one is particularly viable. Oxford, they're dividing Oxford up into districts.
As is Cambridge, yes. So you'll be within your 15-minute cities per the World Economic Forum's plan. And if you decide to take your electric car out there, but you have said the wrong thing on social media, by the way, former Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, who I believe is still a cabinet minister now, he proposed legislation, I don't know if it was formally passed, but this was part of his electric car ban, that allowed the government to remotely turn off your electric car charging port at peak hours, and then I think the company was Octopus Energy, were running tests alongside the national grid with a government mandate that took from your smart appliances energy back into the grid at trough periods of generation. Obviously, they're trying to sell you these smart meters. We've had viewers who whistleblow, working for the national grid, saying there has been a drive to increase the amount of smart meters sold and given out to homeowners because this is a government initiative, and they gave grants to energy companies in order to get these out the door, and now they're going to call in on their loans, so they're going to hang this over their head. They obviously want you to be on a smart meter because then all of your appliances are hooked up to a central device, they're all on renewables, they're all rationable, and they can be switched off remotely. That's the
I keep getting phone
thing.
calls trying to get me onto a smart meter, and I just refuse every time. It's like, no, I'm not having it.
That's who's running the Albert Einstein adverts. They're trying to market to you as, oh, well, it's just the sensible, scientific thing to do. You wouldn't want to do the same thing over and over again and look insane. Would you adopt the smart meter and get on our cost-effective energy policy plan, which some things in America have already doled out. And in the terms and conditions, it said, we do reserve the right to ration your energy at trough times.
So for me, the doing the same thing over and over again would be trusting government. I think that's where you've got to be careful. So giving up net zero, that one's probably not going to happen either. And so there's solution number 5, the bonus one, and the one which I think they're actually going to do, which is to bully us and impoverish us and force us into using less energy. Now, the reason I think they're going to do this is because that's basically what they did with water. So I think I'm right in saying not a single new reservoir has been built since 1991.
No.
And the population has gone up 20% since then. And so what they do in the summertime is they give us a hosepipe ban. I had a hosepipe ban in my area over the summer.
It's still going on, by the way. They haven't lifted it.
Have they not?
Nope. My granddad told me this the other day. He got a bill for it.
That's ridiculous.
In the middle of winter.
I thought that must have ended months ago.
No, I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that when the water companies were privatised, they were sold off to foreign firms, and the Chinese have a part-owned stake in Thames Water.
That's crazy. Okay. But, that's obviously what they're going to do. So I'm going to sum up this segment and just say, look, we're in an energy crisis, and we're here entirely because of political choices. There were four choices that got us into this. It is going for net zero. It is refusing to frack. It is refusing to build sufficient nuclear power, and it's sanctioning Russia. Right? All of those are policy choices that we could change tomorrow. Now, you change one of those, and we're no longer in an energy crisis. You change 2 of those, and we're back to the good old days of relatively cheap energy. We can do what we want. You change 3 of those, and we become an energy powerhouse that exports to Europe, and we're in prime position to become an industrial country, provide real jobs, real tangible benefit, and that's especially attractive at the moment because, of course, Germany is currently driving itself off the cliff. So there's lots of manufacturing investment that could come to us instead of Germany, who no longer have a power base. So it's a policy choice. That's the prime thing. And if I can cap that one way, it is stop voting for these mainstream parties, because we are in this mess because of choices they made.
Thanks very much for watching this segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters, and I hope you're having a very Merry Christmas right now. If you enjoyed that and want more, you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 per month to gain access to all of our premium content. We have also recently started a merch store, so you can go on there and find anything from backpacks to t-shirts to hoodies and far more, so you can find any gift that you want on there for someone who's a fan. If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing on the day-to-day, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.